stopped and wondered if a life can be, well, relived? Or maybe truly lived for the very first time long after you thought all the major choices were made and done with? Today, we're diving into this really profound story about an awakening, a story that kind of suggests a life's true shape might only reveal itself when you least expect it. So, let's start with this powerful thought from the woman at the center of our story, 73-year-old Margaret Holloway. She's looking back, trying to see the real pattern in what she calls the quilt of her life. And this isn't about dying, not at all. It's about a certain kind of stillness, a quiet that finally lets you step back and see the whole picture. So, who was Margaret before all this happened? Well, for decades, she lived what she herself calls a life of arrangement. It was this quiet, super orderly existence of just maintenance. Everything was meticulously composed around what her family, and especially her late husband Martin, expected of her. It was a world where she believed the proper ordering of a life was basically a moral duty. And this, right here, this comparison really frames the central conflict of her entire life. On one side, you've got the arrangement, her world of composure, maintenance, and safety. A world built on keeping up surfaces. And on the other side, the authentic. A world of wanting things, of uncertainty, of being truly seen, and of truth. A world that's been buried so deep she barely even knows it's there. This whole story, really, is about the journey from one of these worlds to the other. Then one Tuesday, right into the middle of the quiet, carefully scheduled life, a letter just drops. It's from a woman she doesn't even know, the granddaughter of a friend from a past she'd locked away a long time ago. And the news is just staggering. Her friend, Eleanora, has died. But here's the real shocker. She died 6 years ago. 6 years. And Margaret never knew. This letter, it's the key that's about to unlock everything. So this letter, it prompts a journey back to a place called Briarton, the old Pryor family lake house. And there, Eleanor's granddaughter, Sophia, gives her this wooden box. It was left specifically for her, with instructions from Eleanor's will that it had to be given to her intact. And inside that box is a discovery that just changes everything. It's not just a few letters. It's a whole stack of them, all still sealed, all addressed to her in Eleanor's handwriting, and they span 32 years. Think about that. A lifetime of conversation, of observations, of feelings, all written down, but never, not once, put in the mail. The very first letter she opens immediately shows the power of what she's found. Eleanor remembers this conversation where Margaret was talking about her garden, about how she couldn't grow peonies. But Eleanora saw right through it. She knew Margaret wasn't just talking about flowers. She was using the only language she had to talk about her unhappy life. And with that one line, Eleanora gives her the permission she never, ever gave herself. Another letter reveals this almost painfully sharp perception Eleanora had. She describes seeing Margaret at a party, just looking out a window when she thought no one was watching. And what Eleanora saw wasn't just sadness. It was this quiet desperation so complete that Margaret had actually given up even signaling for a rescue. She wasn't just seen, her own burial was witnessed. And then this, the emotional core of it all. In a letter written while she was leaving her own marriage, Eleanora makes this absolutely stunning declaration. In their world of unspoken rules and proper appearances, this was a radical act of truth. And by writing it down, and then adding that little note to herself, the world has not ended, she offers Margaret this tiny glimpse of a reality where you could speak the truth and actually survive it. Eleonora had once used this word to describe a piece of music. It's an unusual word, a periant, but as Margaret is reading, she realizes this is the perfect word for the letters themselves. They're an aperiant, a force that is prying open the parts of herself that she had slammed shut decades ago. And this becomes the central theme of her whole awakening. During her visit, Sophia gives Margaret one more thing, an old brass key. It belongs to the music room, a room that was Eleanor's personal sanctuary. It's been locked ever since she died. And Eleanora had left very clear instructions. If Margaret Holloway ever came back, she was to be given this key. So as Margaret stands in front of that locked door, a question from one of Eleanor's letters just echoes in her mind. Eleanor had asked it about herself back when her own life was falling apart. But now the question is for Margaret. What is really underneath all that careful architecture of her own life? When she goes inside, the room is damaged. It's been neglected, there's an untuned piano, a worn-out notebook on the stand, and Margaret realizes the room itself, this whole space, is Eleanora's final letter to her. You can smell the attention, the hours she must have spent in deep practice. And then there's that stunning detail, a hole in the ceiling where the world quite literally has broken in. Right before she goes in, Margaret learns something so profound from Sophia. Her grandmother used to say that the saddest stories aren't about people who are stopped from getting what they want. They're about people who stop themselves. It's a tragedy of will, not of fate. And Margaret, she knows this describes her own life perfectly. So she sits down at that untuned piano, presses a few sour, quiet notes, and it happens. A lifetime of unfelt emotion. Grief for Eleanora, for her marriage, for her own buried self, it all comes flooding out. The dam of composure, that wall she had so meticulously built and maintained for over 50 years, it just breaks. After that flood of emotion, what's left behind isn't the emptiness of loss. It's something totally new. Margaret describes it as the emptiness of a room that's just been cleared out. It's not an absence. It's a space that's filled with pure potential. A clean slate. At age 73. Okay, so what happens after a revelation that completely alters your life? How do you turn that big understanding into actual action? For Margaret, it meant she had to learn an entirely new language, the language of her own truth, the practice of actually being present in her own life. And her new practice begins with these really concrete, courageous steps. First, she starts by telling her story, sharing the truth about Eleanora with her own children. Then, she claims the piano from the old house. And this is incredible. She starts taking lessons. And finally, she begins to write the very account that we've been exploring here. And she freely admits she's terrible at it. Her fingers are stiff, she has no natural gift for it. But for the first time in her life, she's doing something not for a performance or to please others, but for the simple act of the practice itself. She is learning just for the sake of learning. Her piano tuner, a man named Edgar, offers this beautiful piece of wisdom. He tells her that the instrument, it holds the memory of Eleanora's expert touch, but it isn't closed off. It's like a vessel that can hold both the past and the present. It can learn Margaret's new, hesitant touch, just the same way it learned Eleanora's. And you start to see the change in these small but really powerful ways. She starts clearing out her garden in the spring, which is this perfect metaphor for her life. And she starts saying no. She tells her well-meaning but kind of controlling daughter that she doesn't need her to visit, creating space for herself. A simple word she'd spent an entire lifetime trying to avoid. And that really brings us to our final thought. Margaret Holloway's journey, which was sparked by a box of unsent letters at the age of 73, is just this stunning testament to human potential. And it leaves us with a really powerful question to think about in our own lives. Is it ever truly too late to learn the language you were always meant to speak?